So when that book came, I know Ranchor and my wife, they started reading maybe half of the first volume, but after that it went back to the shelf. So most recently, I was trying to see um, Bhakti Shastri, and then in online they said one of the requirements for Bhakti Shastri is you have already read Prabhupada Lilamrita. I said no, I have not read Lilamrita, and then so maybe I'm not ready to take Bhakti Shastri. So then after some time, again Lalita Mataji comes and introduces me this PIHE course, Bhakti Siddhachar. I say what it was interesting to see what is in that, and it says reading Prabhupada Lilamrita. Okay, I'm signing up for it now. Otherwise, I'm not going to read. So anyway, that's the background. So let's do Mangalachakam prayers, and we'll start. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Nilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadhamayam Dadati Swapadapikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Namcha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitilamini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpa Tarupiyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Srila Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay. So let's get into the class here. So Lilamrita Volume 1. So what's the structure, right? So this is also titled in the book as Lifetime of Preparation, right? So Srila Prabhupada was born on 1896, actually on September 1st. So calendar days, according to it, it is his birthday today, but we already celebrated his appearance day last Tuesday. So anyway, so this volume describes his life from 1896 to 1965. Almost 69 years of his life are in one book. But then if you see the volume 2, the planting the seed, it is just for 1 year. So there's probably more details in the volume 2. So there are 11 chapters. It's childhood, which basically describes about his birth and what he was doing, how he went to school and his affiliation to devotion and stuff like that. And then college, marriage, and Gandhi's movement. Then the third chapter is when he meets his spiritual master and this initiation and things like that. And he continues to serve his spiritual master. The war has two aspects. One is after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur left this world, how the Gaudiya Math got disintegrated and how there was war within them, and then the actual world war and things like that was happening in the globe. An Unknown Friend is more about Srila Prabhupada interacting with politicians and Gandhi and others. Jhansi, the League of Devotees, is the first registered organization that Srila Prabhupada tried to establish before he came to US. Crying Alone in Wilderness, that's a very hard story. Basically, I will talk about more in the coming slides. And then he moves to Vrindavan, Vansi Gopalji temple, and then Radha Damodar temple. And this, the momentous hour of need is about Back to Godhead magazine, and then how he starts Srimad Bhagavatam, and the dream come true is about how Srimad Bhagavatam got published, and then how he got tickets to come to US. Right. So that's the structure. So I know a lot of you would have already read, but if you have not, and if you want to know about our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada, I think this is a good reading. It's just a starting trouble. Once you start reading it, you would like not able to keep the book down, so you will actually read it. So just a few small description about the names, right? Like when he was born, so his uncle named wanted to. His uncle wanted to be called him as Nandulal, but his parents, Gauramohan De and Mother Rajani, they gave him Abhayacharan, right? Abhayacharan is one is fearless, having taken shelter of Lord Krishna's feet. Then at the time of initiation, his spiritual master added Aravinda to the name. So it's Abhayacharana Aravinda, right? And then in mid 50s, his god brothers, recognized for his devotion and scholarly qualities, and that they gave him the title Bhakti Vedanta. So at that time it was Abhayacharana Aravinda Bhakti Vedanta. So then when he took sannyasi in sannyasa ashram in 1959, he added Swami to that. So that's we have already seen AC Bhakti Vedanta, and so we just wanted to give a small description on the name aspect. So lifetime of preparation, this is the title. If you just read the introduction, you will just see this. So in 69 years, right, he probably wrote about 3 books, right? One of them was Easy Journey to Other Planets, and then Srimad Bhagavatam, and there was also some Gita Upanishad manuals, I guess. But then in the last 12 years, he wrote more than 100 books. He initiated one disciple, that was Acharya Prabhakar, and then in the last 12 years, he initiated 4,000 disciples. Before he left, nobody believed. Only at the time of the birth, one of the astrologers predicted that when he's 70 years old, he's crossed the ocean and then he'll establish 108 spiritual centers. But then the reality is, in the last 12 years, he established ISKCON and he actually opened 108 centers globally. He had not traveled outside of India. He tried to go to Tokyo for one conference before going to US, but that didn't work out because he didn't have money to buy the flight ticket. And the government of India also declined his request. But he traveled around the globe many times in the last 12 years. So basically the first 69, 70 years was the preparation for the last decade of his life, right? Actually, there is Mother Urmila Mataji, she has some slides around this, where there are more statistics in there. So Srimad Bhagavatam has 18,000 verses. So if you want to read one verse per day along with the purport, it will take 49 plus years for somebody to read consistently. 700 Bhagavad Gita verses, one purport word per day, it will take 2 years. 17 volumes of Chaitanya Charitamrita, 11,555 words. One verse purport per day will take 32 years. And then other 150 books, if you want to read one book per week or one book per month, it's going to take 10 to 20 years. So, but imagine somebody in the last 10 years of his life compiled, composed, wrote everything, and then got it published. That's not an ordinary human being can do that. And he visited 26 countries in the last 10 years, traveled 98 places, 226 times. He spent 43% of his time in US and 41% in India, and the rest of the time across the globe. So that was his last 10 years of statistics. So the first 30 years, this table is there for you to look at and refer to, but I'm not going to go through all the list one by one. But the significance is that's the foundation, right? Like I would say even the initial 10 years is this foundation. It said that Srila Prabhupada got all his qualities of spirituality, like the devotional service practices and all that, from his young age, from his parents, right? And then his qualities about writing and distributing books came from his spiritual master. So those two put together is Srila Prabhupada. So from birth, right, so he was inclined to be spiritual, and his parents were also pure Vaishnavas. So they both gelled together. Right? So he came in contact with the Vaishnava, and then the seed was there, and then he actually grew, right? So yeah, at the age of 5, he did his own Ratha Yatra, and he actually did all the prasadam distribution and all that. And then age of 6, he asked his parents to give him his own deities, so he maintained it. So during free times, he used to go to the local Radha Krishna temple there instead of playing and doing other things. His father was very inclined and very supportive of him being Krishna consciousness and being the devotee of Radha and Krishna. So he would he would always invite Vaishnavas to his home and ask them to bless him so that he is devoted to Radha and Krishna. Right? His father would do deity worship every day. So Srila Prabhupada grew up seeing all that. So read this book. It has a lot of vivid descriptions in the first chapter about his birth. Right. So basically the idea is the foundation, right? Where he got the foundation from being spiritual and all that. He didn't like to go to school, but somehow his parents forced to go to school, and then he later on joined college. But in the meantime, his mother passed away, so that was a great loss for him. And at the end of the college, because of Gandhi movement was very strong, he didn't want to accept the diploma. But still his dad, due to his relationship with Bose, the owner of the pharmaceutical company there, he started working as a manager in the pharmaceutical company, so that anyway he can learn about the pharma business on the job. Right? So in 1922, he and his friend went to see a person who had come to give a class on spirituality. So Prabhupada, at that time, Abhay Charan was very hesitant to go, right? Because at that time, it was very popular for people to come and talk about spirituality, but they were all talking about not pure Vaishnavism. So anyway, he goes and attends the class. So the moment that the speaker was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So the moment he saw these two people, he just said, "You seem to be very intelligent and well read. So why don't you go and preach in English to the Western world?" So no discussions before, no acquaintance, but the moment he saw, he just said that. So Prabhupada was really shocked with this instruction, and he asked this question, right? India is still not independent. We are already under British rule. How is the world going to listen to us? And isn't independence more important than preaching and spreading our culture or about spirituality and about Vaishnava traditions? So anyway, this book has some explanation about his response. So that is where the introduction starts, right? Like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is preaching hard against impersonalist, and then he's also teaching about we are not body, we are the soul. So basically, if we are falling under the movement of independence and we cultivate our nationality, so that is all bodily concept. So at one point, we are trying to say that we are not the body, and then if you go and join the nationalist movement, then that doesn't. So that is important, but more important is beyond that, knowing who we are actually and what is our relationship with God. So anyway, Srila Prabhupada comes out at that meeting and fully is convinced that he will be his guru and spiritual master, and guide, and he wants to help the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement, right? So for that, he needs money. So he needs to support his family and also the Gaudiya Math. So then he moves out of Calcutta and goes to Allahabad and then starts his own business called Prayag Pharmacy, right? And then there's more details about all the travels that he has done, and he visits Vrindavan for the first time at the 1925 for business, and a lot of details are given in how he continued to follow his Vaishnava traditions, and though he has to travel and meet people and all that, right? So um, the next 10 years is more about his meeting with the spiritual master and more discussions with the spiritual master there. So in Allahabad, he helped the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to establish Gaudiya Math. At that time in 1930, his father also passed away. So his father's wish. So at that time, Prabhupada was in Bombay. He had went for business, and then he would come back, and he saw that his father was so ill. He would ask, "What was your wish?" And his father said, "Donate all the cows and things like that to the local Gaudiya Math." So which he did, and then later on in one evening, he brought the disciples from the Gaudiya Math, and they did a home kirtan. And that night, his father passed away. So then he heard that his Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is coming to Vrindavan. They have a parikrama there. So he was able to go on the last day of the parikrama in Koshi. So basically, that evening, there were two options. One is they announced the speaker is going to speak, and there is also a group going to see the nearby temple. So a lot of devotees who were in the parikrama, they all went to see the temple, but there were like handful of people who sat down to listen. So Abhay Charan was one of them, and then he listened very attentively. He didn't leave and things like that. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur made a note of that. And then later on in next month, he was going to come to Allahabad because they were going to open a new center. So the local devotees there, they introduced Abhay Charan to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And then he said, "Oh, I know him. He likes to listen. He doesn't go away. And he's very interested in listening." So he already, because it's the second time, right? Like first time he remembered that he told them to go and preach in the West, and now he's listening. And then they said, okay, he's interested in initiation, and then the initiation happens. So he gets both the initiation at that time, right? So and then so there is also his spiritual master's Vyasa Puja. He writes a nice poem, and I don't know if I have that. What happened was this copy of the poem was sent to his spiritual master, and his spiritual master reads that poem, and he says, "Wow, here is one person who really understands my mind," right? So when I was reading that, it came to my mind about Rupa Goswami's incident with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, where Mahaprabhu had written a verse, or not written a verse. He recites a verse in front of the Ratha Yatra, and Rupa Goswami completes that verse, right? And so we talked about it in. So that was a great example of a disciple fully understanding the mood of the spiritual master, right? So anyway, after the initiation, he continues to do his business, but his mood is not fully in the business. He's always thinking about his spiritual master's instruction, right? How do I start preaching to the West, right? How do I start writing? How do I start establishing a movement? So his god brothers in local Allahabad, they would say, "Why don't you come and join Gaudiya Math, right? Between Bombay and also Allahabad." But Srila Prabhupada didn't join, and they even told the spiritual master that it would be good if he comes and joins, but he says, no, he doesn't have to join. Let him be outside. He will come along by himself, right, on a later day. So this poetry, then after reading this poetry, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, whatever he writes, publish. Right? They had this magazine called Harmonist, Sajjana Toshini. So that was his instruction to his disciples. Whenever he writes, you can publish. So that is how his writing started. Then again, for the third time, I believe he met his spiritual master in Radhakund. Before that, he has met several times, but this is also a unique time to meet. Because what has happened, Gaudiya Math actually grew, and they actually bought their own place in Bagh Bazaar, and it was a palatial building with marbles and all that stuff. So his disciples started fighting with each other, like which room should I occupy, which room should I occupy. Instead of preaching, they were focusing on that. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was very much worried, and he shared that with Srila Prabhupada. I don't know what will happen to the Math because they are already quarreling for. Basically, his preaching is they are behaving just opposite to what he was preaching. And then he said, I wish I could break all the marbles and all the stones in that temple and use for printing. And then after a month, he writes a letter to Srila Prabhupada. In future, if you have money, print books. Right? So basically, these are the instructions he got from his spiritual master. And then, basically, there was his inspiration. And he kept meditating on that, and throughout his journey on doing business and taking care of the family, his primary aim was reading and preaching. Right? There are stories where he would invite people to his home. He would do Srimad Bhagavatam classes, and his family would cook, but his wife and children would not attend the class. They will be sitting in another room drinking tea and biscuit. Right? So in 1937, January 1, his spiritual master passed away in Jagannath Puri. So after that, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's instruction was to have a 12 people governing body to run Gaudiya Math. But that didn't happen, right? Like there were two factions. One wanted to take over the Math, another one wanted to take over all the properties and so forth. So, but we don't want to get into that. It's good that Srila Prabhupada didn't join the Gaudiya Math. He stayed away from all this politics so that he can focus on his family, his business, and his spiritual growth. And so continue to write, recognizing that his god brothers gave him the name Bhakti Vedanta, as we saw in the beginning. So in 1944, he published the first Back to Godhead magazine, which was a 44-page article. That was the first publication. And then he continued to write in different magazines like Gaudiya Patrika, and then he didn't have money, right? He was running the business, but he was not earning that much to actually have his own press and continuously publish. So he wouldn't continuously publish the articles, and then after 10 years, he was able to publish again. He will publish for a few months, and then he will not have money to print. So while he was doing his business travels in Jhansi, there was there were a younger group of people who were interested to hear about his teachings and so forth. So he thought he will go to Jhansi, and then he will encourage people there to learn about Krishna consciousness and establish their Vaishnavas, right? So he starts this league of devotees in Jhansi, and he was looking for a place. All the time he has been looking for a place, right, to establish. And this place was called as Radha Bhavan. And then he thought, oh, this is a perfect place. And he goes to the owner with support of few devotees. And that was at the time he also initiated Prabhakar. Right? His name was Prabhakar, so he gave Acharya in front of it. But though he got initiated, he was pretty much independent, right? Like he would come and be with Srila Prabhupada during the day. He would serve and all that. But he stayed independent and he had his own business in Bombay and all that. So initially, the owner of the place, he said, okay, you can have this place, you can start your mission and preaching. So Prabhupada occupies that place and they register this League of Devotees, and a lot of people come and they have a memorandum and all that. And they did a huge festival for opening, right? Whatever Prabhupada had 3,000 rupees of savings, he spent that day, right? He didn't have a whole lot of money after that. And there was no closure to that property coming through, right? So then he goes back and the owner says, okay, you send me 500 rupees, I will do a contract. So that doesn't even happen. I think he was able to pay that 500 rupees, but the contract didn't happen, right? After some time, again, he goes back and he says, now you have to pay me 5,000 rupees so that I can sell the property. So initially he thought that he will get it for free, but then he felt cheated. And some of the initial members who were supportive of him, they went and on the side of the local governor's wife, who wanted to start a ladies club in that place. So anyway, he didn't want to go into the litigation and stuff like that. So that was a failure. He registered the League of Devotees there, but he could not carry on. So he was rejected, but then he left Jhansi at that time. And also during the time, somewhere around that, he had gone to Calcutta. He wanted his family to come again with him and join his movement. But one day when he came back, he started writing, right? He had written a lot of Srimad Bhagavatam manuscripts. So his wife, she didn't have a lot of money. She traded the manuscripts to buy biscuit and tea. So he comes and sees, and his wife didn't think that it was too big of a serious thing. And he said, oh, I given all your papers to buy tea and biscuits. So that was it. That was his last straw. And he said, enough is enough. I'm done. I'm leaving, right? So basically, nobody thought that he's leaving for good. He comes and goes several times, and they thought, okay, he's joking, he will go and come back. But he never went back to his family, right? So he went back to Jhansi, and then this thing happened, and finally, when he left Jhansi, he didn't have a place to go. He was pretty much homeless at that time, right? So then he went to Mathura to his god brother, and between the two god brothers, one in Mathura and one in Calcutta, they said, why don't you go to Delhi? There is Gaudiya Sangha. You can stay there, where you can still edit one of the magazines there, and you can help publishing Harmonist, right? Because Bhakti Saranga Maharaj was in Calcutta, and Keshav Maharaj was in Mathura. Bhakti Prajna Keshav Maharaj. So Keshav Maharaj was more favorable to Srila Prabhupada. When you read the chapter, right, his god brothers would say, okay, you can go from Mathura to Delhi in a third-class train. And when you get down, you need to walk certain distance to get a Tanga. Because if you get the Tanga near the railway station, it's expensive. If you go and walk one block, it's less expensive. So you take the Tanga and go to that center, it's like 12 paisa or something, we will pay for you. He didn't have any money. Anyway, that was a very disorganized place. They were all young people. They were not actually practicing. They were not doing their preaching and all that. And he continues to get letter from Bhakti Saranga Maharaj that, okay, why don't you take the management of the center as well, right? And then eventually, long story short, they let him go. They let Srila Prabhupada go. Basically, they were firing him from that center that, oh, we cannot. Basically, what happened was Bhakti Saranga Maharaj wanted to publish only 500 articles of Sajjanatoshini or Harmonist. So Srila Prabhupada, he somehow negotiated the printers and said, I can publish 1,000 copies, but they declined. He had more ideas. Give me 600 rupees, I want to publish Gita Upanishad and all that. Right? They said, your ideas are lofty and we cannot support you. So again, after Jhansi, after Delhi, he had no other place to stay. Right? He didn't even have good dhoti and kurta. He had to write to his godbrothers for using these sanghas money to buy a dress. So anyway, after that, he goes back to Vrindavan, and he knew the temple priest there from Vamsi Gopalji temple. That was in 1956, and then he continues to travel. Right. Generally, when people come to Vrindavan, they stay in one place. So the priest thinks, what is this person? He's going and coming back frequently, right? But he goes to Bombay. He continues to write. He continues to write, and he wants to publish Dr. Head magazine. Right? And he writes several poetries about his spiritual master. And during that time, he gets dream from his spiritual master that now it's time for you to take sannyas. He has been living alone, right, like vanaprastha kind of situation for last 10 years. But the calling was there that he needs to get sannyas because sannyas is the way to be a preacher. So he writes to his godbrother in Calcutta, Bhakti Saranga Maharaj. He says, no, you come and join Chaitanya Math, and then you do these things. Once you do all that, then we can see whether to give sannyas or not. Right? So then he writes to Keshav Maharaj, and Keshav Maharaj, like, you need to take sannyas immediately. So anyway, he goes to Mathura, and then the sannyas ceremony happens, and they invite him to speak. So that place, nobody knew English. There are a few people knew English. Everybody knew Hindi only. So Srila Prabhupada gives talk in English because he always had his mind, his instructions from his spiritual master, right? Like, so he was practicing all the time, writing and speaking in English so that he can go to the West and do the same. So that was the dedication that he had and the mood and meditation on the instruction from the spiritual master. So anyway, after that, there was another devotee, another acquaintance. He said, okay, you're traveling back and forth to Delhi because he has to publish, right? Publishing happens in Delhi. So he said, okay, I have a place. I can give you a room in Chipiwada, Radha Krishna temple. So anyway, he stays there. It's a stark contrast between quiet Vrindavan and the noisy old Delhi. While he was in Vrindavan distributing, there are incidents of how he would have his newspaper in his auto and then sitting in tea shops, and then whoever is coming and drinking tea, he will go and give and sell back to God and magazine. He had lofty ideas. There are articles which say that he wanted to distribute 10,000 copies to America, to Canada, to China, and all that, right? Imagine 1950. Now we have crossed millions of copies in distribution. So anyway, so one of the person who receives this magazine, a librarian, he says that, oh, this is newspaper. It's read once and thrown out. And there's also an army officer. He also says the same thing. So then he thinks that's a calling from the spiritual master again. I have to write books, right? So he decides that I need to write book. And then during that time, there was a scientist who published an article, and then he got a Nobel Prize about the other world, an anti-proton. So he took that opportunity and he said, okay, I'm going to write about the other spiritual world and how we can go to the other planets without using any material things like rocket and things like that. That was a 44-page article. He didn't have money to print, unfortunately. So he published us 2 articles in Back to Godhead magazine. Then eventually he managed to get funds for that, and he got first book, right? Um, and then he starts to write Canto 1, Volume 1 of Srimad Bhagavatam. So he goes back to Radha Damodar temple. So I think that was, I'll speak more about in the next slides. And then he continues to go travel between Delhi and Vrindavan. And then he finishes writing and publishes the Canto 1, 3 volumes, uh, between 1961 and 1965. Right? In 1965, August, we all know, he acquired a passport, NOC from the government, visa, a T form, and everything. And Sumati Murarji also gave him a one-way ticket in her ship, cargo ship. So then he was here in US. So that is his last 10 years. So why Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So as I told about the advice from the librarian and the Indian Army officer. So there was a choice between Gita and Bhagavatam, but then he chose to write Bhagavatam, right? So Bhagavatam was most important, elaborate, and authoritative Vaishnava scripture. Both his spiritual master and Bhaktivinoda Thakur had written Bengali commentaries. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was also mentioned that it's a spotless Purana or literature. And these within the setting of Srimad Bhagavatam, to the response to the question for the sages, Sutta Goswami says Srimad Bhagavatam is none other than literary incarnation of the Lord. Right? And there are many more reasons, and we can always glorify Bhagavatam. There is endless glorification we can provide, but to the context of the time, these are some of the reasons that Prabhupada thought writing Bhagavatam will be much more beneficial. And then later on, he writes Bhagavad Gita as it is and all that stuff. Right? So let me see what other notes I have here. So he even gives an example, right? Like Communist Party, Russians never came to India, but they were just distributing literatures and flyers in Calcutta. So people read it and then became communist, right? In Kerala and in Calcutta. So likewise, he said, okay, why not? If I start writing these books and distribute, people can become Krishna consciousness as well. So there is some more description there, right? Like Bhaktivedanta Swami, he used the Sanskrit and Bengali version of Bhagavatam that were edited by his spiritual master, and he referred to a big book written by 12 commentaries from 12 acharyas, right? So that's all authentic. It's not his interpretation of his story. Everything is referred from the lineage of parampara, and that's what he wanted to present. He poured his heart in the book for describing the devotion, the pastimes of Lord Krishna, right? So actually, the Canto 1, Volume 1, 2, and 3, he was alone, and he wrote in Radha Damodar temple. Right? So whoever knows the significance of the temple, you would understand, because that's where Rupa Goswami's ashram is there. Jiva Goswami's ashram, it's actually Jiva Goswami's temple. Radha Damodar was personally carved by Rupa Goswami. And everybody, whoever goes to Vrindavan, they always go to Rupa Goswami temple. You can see Prabhupada's room there, the kitchen, and the direct vision he had to the samadhis, right? So this book has all the description of the room dimensions, and he had to spend 500 rupees to actually renovate that rooms. He didn't have even electricity at that time. And then he paid 5 rupees rent for those rooms. And so that's a little about that. The last few minutes, I want to give credit to some of the key contributors, right? About who have helped Srila Prabhupada to print, right? Writing was one aspect of the story, but getting it printed and published is the other 50% of the effort. So Gaurachand Goswami was the proprietor of Radha Damodar temple, right? So he gave him accommodation at a 5 rupee per month rent for those 2 rooms. And then Pandit Sri Krishna Sharma was the one who gave him a room in Radha Krishna temple in Chippiwada. And so there is another acquaintance named Hitcharan Sharma, right? He was a secretary of J.D. Dalmia, who's a wealthy philanthropist, and he was also the owner of Radha Press, right? So Hitcharan Sharma was the one. He didn't publish the first book because he didn't even have money to give to publish, but he had published several articles for Jhansi, the flyers and all that stuff for the League of Devotees. So he knew him, and then he goes to him and says, okay, he shows all the manuscripts of Srimad Bhagavatam, volume 1. Volume 1 was the first 7 chapters of his manuscript. 400 pages is what he was thinking. He said, okay, I cannot publish, but I will introduce you to another publisher in Gorakhpur, and he's the owner of Gita Press. Right? So his name is Hanuman Prasad Poda. So he sees the manuscript. His publication always publishes spiritual materials. So he was impressed, and he said, okay, I'll give you 4,000 rupees. So to publish one volume, it was 7,000 rupees, but he had only 4,000 rupees. Then he goes and gives to Hitcharan Sharma, I have this 4,000 rupees, can you start printing? Plus he had other small donations of around like 1,000 rupees or something. At that time, you don't need to pay the entire money to get the book published. The agreement was, we'll print all the books, you can take 100 copies. So they printed 1,100 copies of the first set. He will give, the printing company will give him 100 books. He will take and sell those books. And then from the profit of those books, he will take the next 100 copies, right? So there's a lot more details of how he struggled to sell these books, right? He met the Vice President of India, Zakir Hussain, who gave him an interview and so forth. People started giving reviews about the book. People started reading. There was a bookseller who was able to sell some 100 to 200 copies over a period of time. So eventually he got the money and he was able to publish the first volume. Now he needs to write the second volume content. He goes back to Damodar temple. He spends more time, 6 months to 1 year. He finishes the manuscript and comes back. He doesn't have money again to print, right? Eventually he goes to fundraising, and there was one executive from L&H Sugar Factory. He says, I'll give you 5,000 rupees. So again, he's 2,000 rupees short. Same process. This time what happened was, he was not happy with Radha Press because the print size was smaller, 10 size. He wanted to publish a 12 size point size. So he said, okay, I'll introduce to another press called OK Press. So he goes to OK Press and he starts printing there. And then the second volume, he directly goes to OK Press. So there is a lot of description about how he would spend throughout the day in the press reading the proof, right? So they will print the whole manuscript once. They will give it to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada will read, find errors, correct it manually, bring it back. They will set it again in the type manually, everything manually. It's not like right now, like all the modern Word and all that stuff, right? So it's all done manually. He will sit there throughout the day in the press with the printer and those people who are working there. And then like it will be like 3 or 4 times before it will be error free for him to say okay to print. Right after the printing happens, whole paper has to be shifted to the place where it can be bound. Right, so it took 4 months to actually do the binding alone. Right, like there's a description about how it's a factory, like how people cut the papers, stack them up, stitch them, and then finally get it bound. And Srila Prabhupada actually did the front page design And then he engaged an artist from Bengal to actually do that. So that was coming from a different printer. And then all that put together, that's what the first volume came about. And there is all commentaries and reviews and description from the owner of the press about what was Srila Prabhupada's mood. Prabhupada will sit there and he will say, finish this work, finish this work. But for the press, this is not an important work. They had other cash orders, they had Dalmia's orders, so they will all work on that, and only in the evening they will work on Prabhupada's Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada would get upset. You wasted 2 days of my precious time. Oh, you wasted my whole day, you have still not done it. Right. So, but anyway, he was very persistent. He was very determined. He was just has one goal, because he wants to get ready to go to US, to come to the West. For that, he need to have printed books. So then now 2 volumes have been published. He has to continue to write. Again, he comes back to Vrindavan, Radha Damodar temple. He spends the last few more years there, a few more months there to write about volume 3, the last few chapters of Canto 1. Now he has no money. He needs to do fundraising again. So this time he decides to go to Bombay, right? Because he has been traveling all the time for business, so he knows people that go and stay and get help and all that. Throughout the time, he would cook, or he would depend upon others for his food, for the prasadam, and he would still be very strict in what he can take, because he was already a sannyasi at the time, and that time Indians would like, rich people would always like to host sannyasis because of like the good pious activity, not because he's a Vaishnava, he's trying to preach Krishna consciousness, not because of that, but still because of it's a pious activity. So in 1958, when he was in Bombay, he already met the manager of this Scindia Steam Company, because wherever he met people, he will tell his story, his wish that I want to go to West and preach. So this manager, he had said, okay, whenever you're ready, you come, we will pay for your one-way ticket. So he remembered, okay, there's somebody who can pay for my travel. Why don't I go and see if I can get money for it? So he goes there to see the owner of the steam company. The steamship company is called Srimati Morarji, but she doesn't give time to meet with him. So Prabhupada waits 5 hours outside of her office, waiting in the sun and just chatting, right? So that day evening, she comes out and she asks her assistant, who is this gentleman? He says that he's come here to ask for money. He has some book to publish. Then she walks up to him. She says, why are you here, right? And then he says, this is the reason. He said, okay, come tomorrow. And then again, Prabhupada comes back. And then she's a very pious person as well, right? She's Vallabha Sampradaya, or she has Balakrishna deities in her home, and she's very devoted. She sees that saying. She says, whatever you need, I'll keep, go print volume 3. Prabhupada comes back happy. He doesn't have to do any more fundraising. He comes back to Delhi, okay, press, and he gets the book printed. So that's it. He is ready. 3 volumes printed, and he's getting ready to go to US. Again, we don't have time to go into the story. He goes back to Bombay again. He meets Srimati Morarji, and he had to somehow convince her that he can survive in US, and then he can preach and he can come back. So in the meantime, again, he has been telling the story that he wants to go to the West. There was one Agrawal, he heard the story. His son was in US, and he always tells him, oh, here is a spiritual person in India, he wants to come to US. Nobody used that opportunity. Suddenly one day he receives a call from the embassy that we have your NOC approved, no objection certificate. Like, I didn't do anything. And then basically it was the Agrawal had told his son, here is another saintly person wants to come to US. And then he wrote back to the government of India saying that I will sponsor him to come to US, and then I can let him stay in my place in Butler, Pennsylvania for 3 weeks. So anyway, since now he has the NOC, he applies for his passport, and he applies for his visa, and then he had to get a P form. So P form at that time is basically the bank has to say that this person doesn't have any loan or anything, only then they will allow. So that person actually didn't, he said, okay, I'm not going to approve your case. And then he had to go to this supervisor to get it approved. So anyway, again, he comes back to Smriti Morarji, and then she's a very nice person. She arranges everything for him because he didn't have any clothing. So his secretary, Koshi or something, Chokshi, right? So he goes with Prabhupada, does all the shopping for him, buys all the shawl and all that, and they send him to Calcutta to board the Jaladuta. Right, that was August 13th, 1965. He boards. His books, around 200 copies of Srimad Bhagavatam, packed separately. It was waiting in Cochin. So the ship comes to Cochin and then he comes to US. That's a separate story for when I read volume 2. Probably we'll discuss more. So the important significance of September is September 17th is when he got his sannyasi initiation, and then that was Bhadra Purnima, and then this September 17th is also Bhadra Purnima. So during Bhadra Purnima, usually the thing is you invite Srimad Bhagavatam to your home, and so I also request anybody here is inspired by Srila Prabhupada's efforts of how making Srimad Bhagavatam available, written in English. And so here is all the copies, and we have one set of Bhagavatam as well. And here is the front cover, the design, and then some more glorification of Bhagavatam here available. So that's about the class today. It's 12:30. Any questions, any comments, any corrections, or any reflections about Srila Prabhupada? Please feel free. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the wonderful class. Thanks so much, Namo. I just want to know the first time he met his Guruji. He said Guru Pravachan and all that. And then what is the time between that he met second time? When he met second time, he got initiated, right?
Right, yeah. So if you go back, 1922, sorry, and then 1932.
So in between, did he meet
Yeah, Vrindavan. He met him in the parikrama. They had this parikrama, right? So the last day, he was in business, so he could not leave. He wanted to go participate in the parikrama, but he had his business, so he managed to go on the last day. So he traveled, and then the last day is when he met. That's where he listened to the class, and his Guru Maharaj, he said, okay, he was very inspired that he listens. Right? So, any other thoughts? Yes,
this one, thank you, Krishna Prabhu, for giving us the enlightenment, the whole Srila Prabhupada Leela beginning to end. So, oftentimes when I talk to Srila Prabhupada disciples, they say, as long as you work in the mood of Srila Prabhupada, right? So I always wonder, like, what does it mean? Like, after reading Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada, so I got some reflections. And at the same time, what would be your reflection? Like, the community is growing, we have varying degrees of devotees, expanding within the community. We're building this new temple. Many services are coming forward. What would you say based on your reflection from Leelamrita, like what Srila Prabhupada mode is and how that will work in the current state that we are in?
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. It's a wonderful question. I actually had some notes to talk about my own reflections and and things like that as part of time. But yes, um, focusing on the spiritual master's guidance and instructions, right? Like he was very much focused on executing his instructions. So for us, each one of us, if we are initiated, we have our own spiritual masters. We probably have personal instructions, or we have general instructions as well. I think meditating on those instructions and see how we can execute on those is, I think, is an important step. So I have my instructions from my spiritual master. I'm trying to follow that, and I would say we are all busy with service. We think that okay, after our sadhana, doing physical service is uh, is a way to reciprocate. But I would say my experience is we all need to individually devote time to hear and read. Unless you continue to hear and read, you would not understand why you are doing this service even. And if you want to sustain, if you want to really grow, at some point, chanting will become mechanical. You will say, okay, I'm following the four regulative principles, but you will be stagnant. So if you really wanted to grow, and then if you want to also know what is the mood where I have when I do service, right? Instead of putting the importance on from me as a person who's doing the service, right, to the actual cause, right? Why are we even doing this service, right? We all go for, a lot of us go for book distribution, but have we ourselves taken time to read those books, right? I'm not saying we have to read all the books before we distribute, but at least we should spend time to open some of those books and read ourselves, right? So I think definitely it has helped me personally. I'm not a reader. I've never read books. I will read books, but I'll never complete. Right now, I am spending time making that as a point. Uh, Joining classes helps, like Bhakti Sudhacha gives me structure. So that's why I'm reading some of these books. So, and the other thought is one can develop by sharing, right? So if you just read and keep it yourself, things are not going to stick. The other way is while sharing, you now spend more time in reading again. Now that it is not just for you, now you have to share. So you need to make sure you are saying the right things and you are like saying, doing it well. So you will spend more time reading as well. So those are all my thoughts, Prabhu. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Thank you.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes.
But what he did, he sent a book there. That book was Light of Bhagavatam.
Okay, did he send? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. Like so, the 10th canto, right? He took. I skipped that actual phase. So there was a conference where they were talking about peace and spirituality. Prabhupada actually sent a proposal, and he sent a manuscript of some extracts from 10th canto of Bhagavatam. And he also wanted to display about 50 arts during that conference place, right? So he actually sent one first sample, so that gentleman on Tokyo, they were all very excited. They were ready to receive. They were ready to pay for his stay, and they even said you have to stay for one more month, and you can interact with the local mayors and the politicians and all that stuff. Everything was prepared. He even wrote to the prime minister and all that at that time, but they said we cannot pay. It was just 3,000 rupees. At that time, it was very large amount, but they say we cannot, we won't be sending you that 3,000 rupees and send you to Tokyo, right? So anyway, so much failures, right, before he could finally make it and be successful. So we are all here because of our spiritual master, founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. Yeah, already have time. Thank you very much.